Yeah, I'm gonna ace this IOP.
Tim O'Brien is an American writer who primarily focuses on the Vietnam War and sometimes his experiences with the war. Tim has range when it comes to writing. He can go from funny and beautiful to shocking and heart-wrenching in an instant. Tim O'Brien's book of short stories, The Things They Carried, focuses on the Vietnam War and soldiers' experiences before, during, and after the war. And to top it all off, Tim is from Minnesota. Some of his stories take place in or reference his hometown of Austin, Minnesota. I will be examining how O'Brien uses imagery and anecdotes in How to Tell a True War Story, Sweetheart of Song Trebong, and Spin to develop the idea that war changes and distorts people. For How to Tell a True War Story, O'Brien does use anecdotes, but we will be focusing primarily on the imagery he uses. This one wakes me up. In the mountains that day, I watched Lemon turn sideways. He laughed and said something to Rat Kiley, then took a peculiar half step, moving from shade into bright sunlight, and the booby-trapped 105 round blew him into a tree. The parts were just hanging there, so Dave Jensen and I were ordered to shinny up and peel them off. I remember the white bone of an arm. I remember pieces of skin and something wet and yellow that must have been the intestines. The gore was horrible, and it stays with me. But what wakes me up 20 years later is Dave Jensen singing Lemon Tree as we threw down the parts. White bone of arm. Pieces of skin and something wet and yellow that must have been the intestines. The death of Lemon is described as something vile, disgusting, stomach-churning, revolting, gruesome. I'd go on for a while with the adjectives, but I don't think I had the time. The point is that this is something that should never see the light of day. Which leads us to the second part of this quote, Dave Jensen's reaction to the whole situation. Dave, while removing the exploded, bloody remains of Lemon from the tree, starts singing Lemon Tree. It seems that if Dave feels no sadness towards the death of a friend or someone that he's known for a while because they're in the same platoon. He even finds the situation funny and sings a song about it. Let's also point out that the part that makes the narrator lose sleep is not the horrific gore, but Dave Jensen's sociopathic response to the whole situation. Speaking of having terrible responses to bad situations. O'Brien uses imagery the same way that he uses it in the quote from How to Tell a True War Story. Maybe the imagery here isn't as horrific, but it's still imagery after all. Or Ted Lavender adopting an orphan puppy, feeding it from a plastic spoon and carrying it in his rucksack, to the day Azar strapped it to a Claymore anti-personnel mine and squeezed the firing device. To start off, I'm going to be focusing on the calm before the storm of this quote. Ted Lavender actually finds something of worth within this horrible war. A cute little orphan puppy. He feeds it with a spoon, carries it around in his rucksack. They're the best of friends on the battlefield. But of course, nothing lasts forever. Our platoon mate Azar wants to play a wacky prank on Ted. You know that hilarious prank of exploding a poor little puppy? Wait. No, actually, it is pretty funny. Azar's prank is very troubling, though. It shows that Azar takes enjoyment in not only exploding a puppy, but taking something that makes Ted very happy away from him. The other thing that is very worrying is Azar's justification for killing the puppy. What's everyone so upset about? Azar said. I mean, Christ, I'm just a boy. The whole I'm just a boy justification would make a bit more sense if he was like 5, because a 5-year-old might not have a full grasp on the concept of right and wrong. But no, this is a man in his late teens to early 20s. Perhaps he also believes that it's okay because it's not equal or more to the carnage around him. Or he believes it's fine because it's an animal and is not as equal to a human life. That type of thinking, though, is the thinking of a serial killer. But you might be thinking, well, wait, maybe Dave and Azar were horrible people before the war. Well, let's move on to our next quote and hopefully dispel that kind of thinking. All three of the quotes seem to fit the same theme of being anecdotes, but the focus is primarily on the imagery. Listen, this guy sends her the money, flies her over. This cute blonde, just a kid, just barely out of high school. She shows up with a suitcase and one of those plastic cosmetic bags. Comes right out to the boonies. I swear to God, man. She got on culottes. White culottes and this sexy pink sweater. There she is. The imagery here really cements just how innocent our dear Marianne is. Just a kid fresh out of high school, shows up with a suitcase and one of those plastic cosmetic bags. Either she's naive, innocent, or a little bit of both. She comes to the war-torn jungles of Vietnam with makeup, and she's dressed up like she's going to a sock hop. Sock hops are still a thing, right?
Come, let's stroll across the floor.
All right. That's enough of that. Let's just move on. According to Annie Diamond, who heard it from one of the greenies, she took a greedy pleasure in night patrols. She was good at it. She had the moves. All camouflaged up, her face smooth and vacant, she seemed to flow like water through the dark, like oil, without sound or center. She went barefoot. She stopped carrying a weapon. There were times, apparently, when she took crazy, death wish chances, things that even the greenies balked at. It was as if she were taunting some wild creature out in the bush, or in her head, inviting it to show itself. A curious game of hide-and-go-seek that was played out in the dense terrain of a nightmare. She was lost inside herself. On occasion, when they were taken under fire, Marianne would stand quietly and watch the tracer rounds snap by, a little smile at her lips, intent on some private transaction with the war. Other times, she would simply vanish altogether, for hours, for days. And then one morning, all alone, Marianne walked off into the mountains and did not come back. She had crossed to the other side. She was part of the land. She was wearing culottes, her pink sweater, and a necklace of human tongues. She was dangerous. She was ready for the kill. Okay, there is a lot to unpack with this one. There is a drastic difference between Marianne in the first quote and the second quote. Marianne goes from fresh out of high school to a killer who stalks the jungles of Vietnam. Marianne would stand quietly and watch the tracer rounds snap by. She's so far gone that even the Green Berets are shocked by her actions. She's gone from someone so innocent she brings makeup on a trip to Vietnam to someone who no longer fears death and just watches the bullets whiz by. A smile at her lips. So it's almost like she's just laughing in the face of death. While she is still wearing the culottes that seem to be a sign of purity, I think the whole necklace of tongue things might tarnish her whole innocent image. If she had just stayed home in the beautiful state of
Insert state here.
she might have turned out normal. Got married, have a couple kids, and a dog, preferably one that hasn't been exploded by a claymore. The point I'm trying to make is that traveling to Vietnam put her on the path of roam the jungles with her white culottes. Tim O'Brien wants us to see the war messes up the people within it, causes us to do things that we would never, ever do. He does this through the use of haunting imagery and anecdotes that should never be told at a cocktail party or PTA meeting. Maybe a family reunion, but only if Uncle Jimmy's like knocked a couple back, but that's never fun for anyone.